Can you imagine how expensive a contact for the Sauron eye would be?
I always have to hold my cord. It's very annoying.
Everybody hated me.
This is not a cute episode.
Hi there. Welcome to Reading Queens podcast. We're here to talk about books, as we do, and more specifically, book villains. We're very excited. Some of us are more excited than others to talk about this topic. But yeah, we're here. So I'm Valia. Hi.
I'm Alison.
I'm Abby. Hello.
I am Kristin.
And she's the one that's very excited.
Very excited.
Yes. I'm a little sick, in case you can't tell. My voice sounds so weird. I listened to myself back when I was testing this, and I'm like, okay, cool beans. So I might not talk as much as usual, but every time I say that, I talk anyway. Whatever. Let's just get into this. How's everybody today?
Doing pretty great.
I'm good. It's Monday, it's happening. Actually, I love Mondays, so it's good.
Me too.
I was going to say, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I love Mondays.
They're
my
not very
favorite.
many of us that I have loved Mondays. I remember, did I tell this story before? I was in middle school and my friends were talking about their favorite day, and it was like Friday and Saturday. And I was stunned. I was like, how can you like Friday and Saturday the best? Like, that's the end of the week. Like, your week to get stuff done is over.
Yeah.
See, I like Mondays because growing up, I always had piano lessons Mondays from kindergarten through all the way through high school. And so now as an adult, I do not have piano on Mondays, and that's why it's my favorite day. Like, I'm free.
That's the best.
I thought it was the opposite. Like, you were really sweet. Like, you loved music and it got you motivated, and I was going to...
I do.
Really
I love
adorable.
music. But I also like not having to drive like 45 minutes away, sitting down in my piano teacher's, plunking on the piano, doing all my worksheets, like driving 45 minutes home. And it's Monday. It's free. Like, this is awesome.
Yes, serious commitment.
That's great. That's great. I do love Mondays actually too, but mostly because it's like our Queen's Day. So, because I like that we have our Zoom, in the morning, and then we have this. So it's like fun for me because it's like the day we hang out.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's my social event of the
there
week.
you go. That's what we do.
It's kind of sad though for all of us.
It's not the only time I
It's our
see
one
people,
social
okay?
thing.
I
And
just
it's
like
online.
you guys.
Introverts unite.
Yeah, so anyway, moving on. No, I'm just kidding. Alison, how are you doing? How's life in your corner of the world?
Good. Yeah. I am okay about Mondays. I wouldn't say it's my favorite day of the week, but I always feel like if you think about my day, I love the mornings because I always feel really optimistic about everything I can get done in the day, and then I get to the evening and I'm like, what happened to the day? Where are all the things that I didn't get done? So I feel like if a week is like that, the Monday is my super optimistic, I can do all the things this week. And also I'm like more rested after the weekend, so it's quite nice. Whereas it gets to like Thursday is my really struggling to get through Thursday day. But yeah, everything's good apart from that. We went away the other weekend, which was super exciting, and we stayed on a farm and they had baby calves, and we got to feed the calves their milk, and it was so cute.
Did you steal one? You should have totally stolen one.
We couldn't fit it in the car.
She
But
tried.
they're like baby cows. They're like little
I mean, they're
ones.
slightly bigger than my cat. Yeah, still a bit of a struggle to get in the car.
That's cute. Okay, enough of cuteness. Let's talk about villains. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Evil and
This
darkness.
is not a cute episode.
We have talked about anti-heroes before, and we have mentioned villains in other episodes, but this is like a specifically tailored conversation about villains. So we're just going to dive right in. I'm going to ask a couple questions and just take it away, ladies. But the number one question I want to ask is, what makes a good villain?
Outfits. I'll answer that right now. Leather, black, villain aesthetic. It's a whole vibe. That makes a good villain. Or like Cruella de Vil with her like
she's on my
craziness.
list. Yes.
Yeah? Okay,
Yes.
okay.
That's so funny. She's top of my list.
You know what? I never even considered
That's
the outfit.
hilarious.
good. I've got all this list of like character tropes and what they're like and their backstory, and you're just like, the outfits.
Like the outfits, the hair, if they're into makeup, like the makeup, it has to all be like on point, like beyond it. Like you just love to hate them because they're so shiny and beautiful and like put together, and it just makes me love to hate them even more.
I kind of love
Is it like
that.
the Devil Wears Prada vibe?
Exactly. Like Meryl Streep was awesome
She was
in that
epic.
movie.
Yes.
But she also had like, I don't know, she had the vibe. She didn't get up in your face angry. She whispered. That's my Meryl Streep whisper voice. She whispers.
You know who
You
else?
can hear that.
The opposite outfits is Professor Umbridge.
I love her. She's my favorite villain of all time.
She's the best villain.
So they skipped a bunch
like,
of stuff. I had that question later, but whatever.
Yeah, we did. Sorry, we're jumping ahead. But
Yeah.
Can we back up then? Can we talk about the difference between a villain and an antagonist?
Yes, go for it.
Yes.
Does anybody want to go first?
Kristen has notes.
Okay, I'll take a stab at it. Yeah, she does.
I was like, Kristin, you said that with like, no, I'm going.
No, I'm leaving it open so I can wrap it up.
Okay.
Okay, I'll take a stab at it. I'll take a stab.
Okay, you go.
Okay, an antagonist is anybody who throws up in opposition to the hero. So it could be the big brother. It could be oh gosh, it could even be the boyfriend. Like they throw up some sort of roadblock and the hero has to overcome it to get to the goal. A villain, on the other hand, I would say they're actively working against the hero. Like they're not just doing their life and there's a little bump. They're like building bridges and building mountains in the way of the hero. Okay, that's my stab.
No, that's exactly what I had. Alison, do you have anything to add, or Valia?
I think the only thing I'd add is that I always think of villains as actually having at least a kind of thread of evil in them, or like, and you know, being sadistic, or you know, they are not nice people, and they may have their reasons for that, but they're not nice. Whereas I think antagonists actually, you know, you can have someone who is not a bad person but is still an antagonist for the protagonist, and particularly, you know, in some genres of fiction. So like, you know, romance novels, often an antagonist will be like, might be the love interest, for example, but you don't, you know, they're not necessarily a villain. I know we're not getting. Sorry, I was skating really close to this line we were talking about are we going to talk about villains as love interests? And I don't want to go there. But I think, yeah. So I think that's something that where I differentiate it, because personally I don't like a villain as a love interest, but I can cope with an antagonist as a love interest.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have a question then. What do you think of? Okay. Shoot, I'm forgetting the word. Like when Disney, they flip the story around, and so. Like Maleficent, she becomes the hero because they portray her where she doesn't have that evil streak, the villain, you know, they make the villain into a good guy. So what do you think about that then?
Well, what we're talking about here is that villains, a good villain is typically the hero of their own story. So I think that Disney flips it so you can see it purely from their point of view. And then obviously they also soften the character, because for the traditional fairy tale, you have to have a worthy antagonist. You want to root for the hero. So you have to give the villain this evil streak. But when you flip the script and you have it from the villain's point of view, then it becomes necessary, specifically in Disney movies, to soften the villain so that they become the hero.
I think another interesting example is Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. So you've got the villain of the Hunger Games, President Snow, and then you've got, so the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is obviously his prequel story. And I went into that not thinking that I was going to like it, because, you know, I love the Hunger Games, and I was like, he is a good villain. I hate him. I don't want to like him as a result of reading this book. But I actually really enjoyed it because it meant that I understood his character a lot more, and it gave a lot more, obviously, depth and backstory to him, which you don't get during the Hunger Games. And it really explained why he became the villain of the Hunger Games. So I really enjoyed that as and maybe I felt a little bit more sympathy for him. And that, I guess that's not quite the same thing, but I think it's, you know, in terms of those like villain sympathy stories or villain redemption stories, I guess the other sort of flip side of that is, do you like stories where the villain gets redeemed at the end of it?
No.
Well, yeah, you're talking about character arcs. So that's, you know, slightly different. But what I think that Suzanne Collins with her prequel story is it shows why she's the master.
See, I have absolutely no desire to read that book at all because I like to keep President Snow in the villain category. Like I don't want anything else.
He is still a villain. Like you get to the end of that book, and so you may start off reading, or this was my experience. So I started off reading the book kind of feeling some sympathy for him, like in terms of, you know, sort of seeing him as a new character. But by the end of the book, I was like, no, I don't like him. It's like she does, as what Kristin said, it is quite masterful because you don't feel totally sympathetic for him. You see where he's going and you don't like that. So you can see how he then becomes the man. You know, he's already kind of getting there towards the end of the book.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess that would make sense more. I just feel like I don't want to spend, like, waste time reading about a character I hate.
I would not say, I mean, I don't want to give loads of spoilers, but it's not a happy ending.
Yeah.
It's definitely it's a downward character arc. It's a negative character arc, which not everyone likes in a book. But I think because this is the prequel to the Hunger Games, you know, people liked it because they know where
like he gets his comeuppance and stuff. I like my villains to be villains. Like I like them to be dark, and I like them not to have a redemption story because I like to see them punished for their evil deeds. So I'm probably like the one person that is not a big fan of like villain love interests or any of that stuff. Like an antagonist love interest, yes, give it to me. I love that tension and that you know, opposites attract and opposites work, you know what I mean? Like all of that, I love that. But when it comes to an actual villain, I'm like, no, the darker the better. Like make this person every single terrible characteristic, like step into it, give it to me. So
evil, soak in the evil.
Oh, so I was going to say, so I agree in terms of the love interest. So this is why, like, I just didn't like the whole Alina Darkling thing in Shadow and Bone, because I feel like he is a villain, at least in that book anyway. So I'm not a huge fan of that. But in terms of, like, I like them to be dark, but I also like them to have a bit of grey. Like, I want them to have an interesting character and a really developed character. And I feel like, you know, no one starts out as pure evil, so having that understanding of how they get there, if that's what they are in the particular book, I like to understand that backstory. But I think most importantly for me, they have to have motives that make sense. So I kind of don't like it when they're evil for the sake of being evil, if you know what I mean.
You don't want a
mustache
twirling villain.
Yeah. I like it when they believe that what they're doing is the right thing, if you can pull that off without like pushing it so far that they would have to be completely deluded or mentally unstable to kind of believe that, because I don't really like that as a trope. So I love it when they think they're doing the right thing, but actually they're going about it in the wrong way. And the other thing which I kind of really like, which is a bit more niche, is I like it when they have a connection with the protagonist. So, for example, they're a family member, or perhaps they're related to the antagonist's love interest, or something along those lines, because I find that adds a load of extra conflict to that relationship.
They're an ex-best friend. That happens in every superhero movie.
Yeah, I like that.
That's true.
I go to push back on one thing you said. So I'm kind of like Valia in that I don't necessarily like villain love interests, but I was okay with the Alina and Darkling love thing going on because, okay, hear me out, because I don't actually think it was a love thing going on. Because, okay, you're an evil villain, you're not actually loving somebody, you're just manipulating them to get what you want. Like, it's not love. And so in that sense, like, I'm okay with it because it's not love. Like, they're not being selfless. They're not.
Right.
whatever. They're just trying to manipulate.
Yeah,
on a
and
different
that's
level.
what makes him, I think, a good complex hero, because in his mind, he, like, for him it is love, but it's not actually love. You know what I mean? Like, and stuff. And I think this is where readers as general, like, romanticize that in a way that makes him appear, like, if I'm explaining his character and his relationship with Alina to somebody, like, I will explain it in a different way than somebody who has romanticized that relationship into a romantic, like an actual romantic arc of he'll burn the world for you or whatever, you know? And so I think that's like where readers kind of take villains, and which we want readers to take characters and make them their own. Like, that's the whole thing. But sometimes when it comes to villains, I feel like they take that into categories where I'm like, guys, come on. Like, let's not do this. Like, let him be a good villain. Like, you know.
Yeah, because I think I want the villain to be defeated. And if you make them good, in inverted commas, like, you're not defeating them, right? You're changing them. And I think that is a different thing.
That's a really good point.
That could be a defeat. Like, if you change somebody's heart, isn't that the most impactful defeat possible?
I guess.
Oh.
Okay, Kristin, you've been very quiet. All of your notes.
Have I?
Yeah, give us.
I'm just listening and nodding.
I know.
And just enjoying the general conversation. Well, and also I'm just listening to where everybody's going, and then I'll like add in but I think all of these are really great, valid points, and it's interesting. So I'm here for it, 100%.
You know what the change? Okay, this is going to be a little far-fetched for some of you guys, but just go with me. Okay, so the My Little Pony TV show, like the new generation, not the newest one, like the movie that just came out, but the middle two that came out like 10 years ago. Okay, go with me a second. Their whole thing is that they don't defeat villains. They change them. So at the end of every episode, the villain that they come against, they always have a heart change. And so they would agree with you in that the heart change is the way to like defeat the villain the most impactfully or whatever.
I mean, I
watched all the seasons.
I don't do that in my stories. My characters kill the bad guy. They're dead. They dead. But if I'm thinking about, we'll circle back. Let's circle back to this. Valia's like your favorite villains that you've written, because we'll circle back to that.
We can talk about that.
But I did.
If you want.
You want to jump to that right now?
We're all over the place. These questions mean nothing.
I mean, I just brought up My Little Pony, guys.
Well, no,
I mean, come on.
That was awesome. So when we're talking about antagonists, versus villains, but when we go to antagonists, you can have an environment be an antagonist. You can have yourself be the antagonist, and then you can have somebody else be the antagonist. And then also you can have somebody else be the villain. So in my series, each of my books has a villain or an antagonist that my main character, Nika, needs to overcome. And then the first one, there's multiple, but the main one is a curse, which is an actual plague. And at the end, she defeats it. Spoiler, the plague is defeated. And but one of my very favorite antagonists is somebody, and she does have a streak of evil, and she is one of those characters that my readers love to hate. But then in the end of the series, like, she has, of all the characters, the most dramatic heart change. And I knew that when I wrote her. And so knowing the potential that she had to go from evil to good was very exciting and rewarding to watch, and to write. But also for each book, my character did have villains, like evil villains that she literally slayed.
Okay, do you guys have a favorite character villain that you've written? Abby, do you have one?
I was actually thinking, I don't gravitate toward writing villains,
okay,
which is interesting. What I've noticed just across the books I write, I tend to write, that there's no like one evil bad guy. There's there might be layers of bad guys, and then eventually in 3 books in, somebody kind of, oh, it turns out they're bad, but I didn't plan that from the beginning. I was like, oh shoot, like, well, okay, they can be a villain. But yeah, it's more like there's a blanket of forceness. I don't know how to describe it. Like there's no big bad villain, but I didn't notice.
Yeah. So you have more antagonist in every book versus an actual big bad villain.
Yeah. Yeah. And even the one big bad villain in my sci-fi series, there's like a showdown moment, trying to do this without spoilers. But what I like about her is that she actually has the most in common with my main character. And it's so in some way they're very, very, very similar. They just did things slightly differently.
I think that makes a great story when you have a villain and a hero who want the same thing. They want the same outcome.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not a bad thing, but the way that really helps showcase the hero's way about getting it versus the villain's way of getting it.
And that's kind of my favorite villain that I've ever written was Baba Yaga in my Skaska books, because especially in the original trilogy, Callista and her they're working towards like the same goal, really. But you find out like it's the same goal, but there are different what's the word I'm looking for? Motivations for it, basically, you know? So like my villain has specific motivations for why she wants this outcome, and it would not be a good outcome for, you know, everybody. But the hero is on the other side of it, is like working towards the same thing, but her motivations are actually for the good of other people besides herself or whatever. And I also really I thought of it when you said that the clothes and all that stuff, like, you know, in Russian culture, Baba Yaga is this haggard, ugly, horrible looking creature that eats children and all this stuff. And I did not take away any of her characteristics in a sense of she eats children and curses people and all this stuff. But she is a beautiful creature. She's like the most beautiful person they've ever seen. And she wears these elaborate dresses and just this gorgeous hair. And she just looks like the most beautiful thing ever. And I love doing that to my villain because it's like, no, yeah, she's gorgeous. Like she doesn't look like somebody who's going to eat you up, you know, kind of thing. It was just really fun making that a slight change just about her appearance that made her so much different, and then having her goal for the land be so similar to Callista's, and then her being the villain and Callista being the hero. So anyway,
yeah, I think what you're saying, changing her clothes and beauty and all that, I think that what I like about that in a villain is you expect somebody evil to be like hideous, like we just good equals beautiful, good equals beautiful, evil equals hideous, and we just kind of make those connections. And so when you cross them, it just makes it even more like twisty in your mind. Like your brain just can't do it.
I think more writers are doing that because we want to make evil seem enticing. So that's the same thing I do in my story with my girl that is a streak of evil. She's probably the most beautiful character in the story, and she's wealthy and she dresses really nice and she has all those characteristics that draw you in, but you see right away that she's rotten. Well, she's rotten under that shiny.
That's why I like Professor Umbridge so much, because she's a cute little pink grandma with like fluffy hair and cats and like doilies and kitties and everything. You're like, oh, so sweet. And then she's awful. It just does not go together. Oh
yeah, she is a great example of juxtaposition. And with Harry Potter also, one thing that Rowling did really well was give Harry Potter and Voldemort some similar background, so similar skills and history of, you know, growing up in a place where they didn't feel loved and, you know, just a lot of wounds, and then seeing that a hero overcomes and chooses the good. And then a villain just, dives down into the evil.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on that physical kind of stereotypes, because that's one of the things that I don't like about villains. And I think this was kind of really brought home to me. I was reading an article the other day, which was written by a woman who suffered major burns after a plane crash, and she ended up being disfigured and having scars as part of that. And when she was a child, people called her Freddy Krueger on the street.
Aww.
And were associating those negative character traits with her because of how she looked. So I feel like almost we have a bit of a responsibility maybe to go away from some of those negative stereotypes as authors. I mean, that's not to say, obviously, anyone can have scars, right? Good guys can have scars and bad guys can have scars, but don't necessarily make the villain ugly or disfigured unless that is part of their backstory and the reason for the way they are, perhaps.
Yeah. Or I'd even add to, if you're using it as a shorthand, like if you're not trying to give that message or carry that responsibility, or you just want one quick glance at them and you know who they are. Like you're intentional. Basically.
Well, that's actually been challenged because Shakespeare challenged that, and Charles Dickens challenged that as far as looks equating qualities of the heart. So, which I appreciate because, with Charles Dickens, I'm thinking specifically of, I did not plan this and my mind is drawing a blank. Little Dorrit. The characters in that are challenge those assumptions, where sometimes somebody who has awkward mannerisms, is not attractive, is loathsome in the community, but is actually a really good person and ends up being a hero in the story.
Yeah, but that was also their point. Like their point was to challenge that.
Yeah. Yes, I love that.
I was trying to think. I feel like there are like books right now, like in YA fantasy, where the main character is the one that has like a scar or some kind of a disfigurement or something like that. So I feel like more often nowadays you see the hero, the one with like the visible cues, I guess, to like ugliness in a way. And then they're like...
But there's also the trope of the protagonist who's gorgeous, who doesn't know she's gorgeous.
Well, yes, I mean, obviously. But I feel like now it's more of like, oh, she has like visible something on her face or like a birthmark or whatever. And it's like people just expect or overlook her because in the society, she's less than perfect. And then, she rises up to become a hero or something like that. I feel like I've seen that a couple of times recently, and I'm like, okay, like that's just, opposite. But obviously I just don't like anything overused. So as long as you get, like, I think Alison was saying, as long as you give it a good reason, I'm good. Like, give me good reasons for everything you do, and we're good.
Well, have you read Deadly Education, Naomi Novak?
No.
Oh, God. Guys. Okay, Valia, I really think you would like this. It's a school story, dark academia, fantasy, and they're basically all in a school that's trying to actively kill them, and they're trying to, like, make it to graduation and get out. It's awesome. But I love the main character because she's so grouchy, and she's just mean, and I just like, we would not be friends. Like I don't know, you're cranky. And it's so refreshing because is not a spoiler, but she's like prophesized to be the next villain of the century or whatever. But it's cool to see her trying. Her personality fits that, her looks fit that, everything about her fits that, and yet she's actively doing stuff you wouldn't expect. And it's a great book. The third one comes out this year, I believe.
Okay.
You all should read it.
Yeah, I should read it.
Well, Abby, I feel like with you that makes sense because of all of us, we're like a little more like quietly internal or a little surly when we talk, and you are like the sunshine.
So she's the one with the dark recommendations.
Yeah, I'm like the horror writers. You know, like they say, like the horror writers are some of the happiest people you meet because they get all their darkness out. I think I'm like that with my books.
When I read an arc of your story and I did a critique on it, I was shocked that came from you. What the heck is up with those protagonists? She's evil.
Oh yeah, that sci-fi short.
I was like, did you mean to write an evil protagonist because she's evil?
Oh yes,
That's hilarious.
I did.
Wait, okay, hold on. Back up. Allison, did you tell us a favorite villain that you've written?
Oh no, you didn't.
Yeah, let's do that before we go anywhere else.
Okay, sorry. I love how this like
It's just everywhere. It's fine.
Everywhere.
It's great. So I don't know. So in my main series, in my main dystopian series, I actually have a number of villains, and it's really hard to talk about without giving major spoilers, which don't come to light until like the final book. So you have to read the whole story to get the full juiciness. But and a lot of them are quite morally grey, and I do love that. And I had a couple of characters who I weren't sure whether they were going to end up being good guys or villains when I kind of wrote them. But I think perhaps my favourite villain is just in one of the books. So it's probably the only book which has like a standalone villain, as like Kristin and Abby were talking about in the book, and I love it because he has been conditioned by his upbringing to believe that what he is doing is right, and he wholeheartedly believes that what he is doing is right, and he's willing to stand by that to the very end. And so one of the things I love, and I kind of did a slightly similar take on this, slightly different but similar take on this. So one of my favorite villains, not from a book, from a movie, is Killmonger from Black Panther. And I like, he's just one of my favorite villains or antagonists or whatever you're going to call it ever, for various reasons. But one of the reasons is, sorry, this is a spoiler if you haven't watched Black Panther, but I'm going to say it anyway, is his death scene. Because he chooses to die rather than being imprisoned, and I absolutely love that in a villain. Like, so like even at the end when they're being defeated, they're kind of taking control of their own fate.
Ooh, that's a good
That's
point.
one of my favorite things. But I am gonna, just before we move on, gonna put a quick plug in, because if you are listening to this like the week it goes out, so if you've downloaded it straight away and you're one of our regular listeners, the first 2 books in my dystopian series, which is the Wall series, are free until Sunday the 13th of March. So if you're listening, I want to say live, but it's not actually live. If you're listening very shortly after this goes out, then you can kind of have a taster of that series for free.
Perfect. And I will link that. Yeah,
Okay,
I will link that in the
Awesome.
description so
That's
you
awesome.
can check it out for sure. Okay. So we've talked about a little bit about like what makes a bad villain, but is there anything else that you would like point out and be like, okay, no, this villain is like just terrible because of these things? Or do you have like a
Like terrible in a good
no,
way,
like
or terrible
yeah.
in a bad
no,
way?
like bad, like a badly written villain? Like what would be something
Oh, okay.
that's
Well, one that's incompetent.
yeah,
That's
Yes.
not a true risk.
Yeah, or they're too easy
Yes.
to defeat at the end. That always annoys me.
Or just a stupid villain. like I want my villains to be geniuses.
You need somebody that's at the same skill level as your hero, so they are difficult to beat, if not stronger than your hero, so that the hero has to rely on extreme wit and strength or allies or something really clever that the reader gets excited to see how that's going to play out.
Yeah, that's a good point. Do you know of a villain that you like in movies or books that you just like hate because they're just like a terribly written villain? No.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I just gave up
I wasn't-
reading if it's like
Okay.
that.
Yeah, I haven't. I didn't make any notes on that. I was.
Sorry.
The
I know,
villains
I'm like
I
that.
really
I'm like, I have to think about these things in advance.
I know. So
Oh, well, did you guys ever watch Meet the Robinsons?
probably.
Oh yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Goob.
We have quote. We use a quote from that all the time. We use it all the time in our house
I
with our
had
kids.
tiny arms.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Or they're like, everybody hated me.
Yeah.
Because when my kids are like having a pity party and we're like, everybody hated me. And then they storm upstairs and slam the room because they know we're mocking them.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, it's
I'm a very compassionate mom.
Yeah.
It's a very good example of like a badly written villain or like an incompetent villain, but then you kind of figure out that that person's not actually the real villain, and
right?
Like, oh, that explains it.
Yeah,
but like it's a good example of that, and it's really funny, guys.
and yeah, I disliked that. I liked that.
Yeah, I'll like chase my husband around. I have a big-headed, tiny arse.
What's that line where he's like, "You didn't think through this
Yeah, you
revenge,
didn't think
this revenge plot through very well."
Oh my goodness, you guys are too much.
I do quite like it sometimes, and I can't think of an example, but I think sometimes in like some movies, maybe like comedy movies, where you have like a comedy villain, but then I feel like they're not really
right. Yeah,
yeah, that's like that guy in.
They're not dark enough. Yeah, is that okay? So I have a different example. So it's not necessarily a badly written villain, but it's just a villain that I don't personally like, and it might be a bit controversial. And I'm not one to slam Tolkien because I love Tolkien, but I think in The Lord of the Rings, Saruman makes a better villain than Sauron.
Oh, do tell.
Because, hear me out. Because Sauron is just, he's too like abstract.
Like removed?
He's too like pure evil.
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
like you know nothing about him unless you've probably read, all the like prequel things. But like he's literally like an evil eye, and that's all you find out about him. Whereas like Saruman, you see his like fall down from being good. You have this contrast between when he was good and he's the white wizard. You've got that kind of whole symbolism or stereotypical thing going on, and you get to see him fall and become this kind of evil person. So as a kind of villain, I much prefer him because you can kind of see some of his reasoning, and he has a more developed character, whereas like Sauron's just this evil eye in the sky. I'm like, I just can't feel anything for that.
Can you imagine?
I can't feel enough to hate them.
Can you imagine how expensive a contact for the Sauron eye would be? It's like the size of a mountain. They're like, wow. All the orcs are shoving it up.
Abby, your brain is just too much.
I just had this visual of like all these orcs standing on top of each other, and they're trying to like shove this contact lens into Sauron's eye.
And then it starts to tilt over at the top, and you're like, no!
I wish you guys could see them on video because they're like reenacting these things, and it's the funniest thing ever. Anyway, no, I'm just kidding. So let's talk about our favorite villains. I know you guys mentioned some, but Kristin, do you have a list for that? Because I feel like you were so prepared.
I did. I have
how long is it?
But I'm just prepared for wherever the conversation might go. But most of them we mentioned.
Okay.
Like Cruella de Vil was my number one.
Okay,
and
why
then,
her?
Yeah,
though?
give me a reason for why it's number
because
one.
Because in the cartoon, she is just very evil, and she's active and she's smart. Like,
Okay.
and there's no questions. Like, she is a bad person. So she's just a really great example of of a stereotypical villain. Like, you could put a stamp on that villain. And the other one I had was that's a stereotypical example is Captain Hook. And not in the cartoon version, but in the written version, because he's darker in that version. And one thing that writers were talking about, or online, the chatter was, one thing they liked about Hook, and I think it was Alison might have mentioned this, is that he has some things that make him unique quirks. Like he has a real fear. And so giving your villain some depth like in that way can be really helpful. So they liked him. And then Voldemort is a really great classic villain because he is so dark and so selfish and prideful. I think that those are two things we haven't talked about as far as villains, but if you're talking about characteristics, I think that those would definitely be part of that. And I think that that goes along with the Darkling also, prideful, selfish. So at the end of the day, everything he does, it's really about him. And he goes about getting what he wants in very manipulative, deadly, dark ways. And then Umbridge, and we already talked about her, but really great villain.
Okay.
I think that's a really good point about Pride, actually, because I think often that contrasts with, and pretty much every villain is proud, you're right. And I think that really contrasts often with the protagonist kind of character arc, because their character arc is about like gaining confidence and self-belief in themselves. So you think about Harry Potter, whereas the villain, you know, starts out off in that place, and then that's often their downfall.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't think about that.
I like that the contrast aspect, right? Like the prideful versus somebody who's gaining confidence, selfish versus somebody who can sacrifice everything. Like, you know, I feel like that's when you have like a good balance of that on page or on screen, it's like, yeah, like you can see it without it being like shoved down your throats or, you know, not good enough kind of thing. And so, especially I think Kristin said when they're coming from a similar background, you see how somebody develops in different ways. Because I think there's multiple studies obviously about the way our brains work, but I've heard a lot where you have people go through the same kind of trauma and there's two outcomes. You become a narcissist or you become an empath. And so it's like, when you write a story like that where you have a narcissist versus an empath, like that's fascinating because you're literally coming from the same kind of a pot growing, but it's two different plants based on the choices that they've made, you know, kind of thing. And so I don't know, I just really like that. So that's all I have to say about that.
Who's your favorite villain, Valia?
I don't know, actually. Like, I was trying to think of an answer to that question. And I mean, obviously the ones that you've mentioned, I've liked, you know, like I think those are, you know, well written or well acted, depending if I've read the books or not. Let's not talk about that. But I couldn't really think. I do really like Killmonger in Black Panther because of how he's just different, you know, like you don't expect him the way he is portrayed. Like, I don't know.
I think you can really empathize with him. And I think actually the story in the film is different to the comics. I haven't read the comics, but in the film, certainly, like you can empathize with him and the decisions he's made because of the background and how he's been treated. And I think it's kind of made it obvious quite subtly that if he had been treated a different way, then he may not have ended up the person he was.
It's kind of like with Scar and Lion King. Like I always think of him as like, he's just so prideful. Like he is so prideful that he will literally do anything to be the king of the jungle, you know, kind of thing. And he just will scheme his way. Like it's like a core memory of, you know, him coming down to Simba crying, you know, after the stampede, and he's just like, what did you do? Like, what did you do? You know, kind of thing. But it's so smart, right? Because it's like so manipulative.
It's so evil.
And it's just like those are the kind of things where like I really love, where it's like you don't even have to be outright, I'm an evil, like, let me whatever, but he's just like, oh my goodness, I won't tell anybody the way you did, you know, if you run away right now, kind of thing. And it's like, that's so pure evil.
So manipulative.
I really love manipulative villains, actually.
What? Who's Sherlock's nemesis again? Not Mycroft. Moriarty. I love Moriarty. I love the BBC Sherlock's Moriarty because he's so playful and like such like a kid, and it's that, I guess for me it's the incongruity that makes a good villain. Like things that you don't expect and they're mashed together. And then I also like Elementary's Moriarty because that's such a twist you don't see coming.
Yeah.
Agreed.
That's a good one. Yeah. I don't know. I couldn't really think of one that like stood out to me so much that I'm like, oh, yeah.
Think about fairy tales.
Okay.
I always find them too, I don't know, they're too kind of black and white for me though. Like I do like a little bit more of that grey in there. So a couple of my favourites are Mrs. Coulter from Philip Pullman's Dark Materials trilogy. And I first read those books when I was either a kid or a young teen. I read them when they originally came out in the UK. And when I read them then, I was just like, she's kind of a typical villain. But then when I've read them since and also seen the film and the TV series that's been done, her character's actually a lot more complex than that. And I think there's a couple of really interesting ways in how she's portrayed. I think firstly, she's a woman with power in a very patriarchal society. And I love that because it makes you wonder what part society has played in shaping her and turning her into a villain. And she also has a lot of inner turmoil and conflict that's played out in this kind of strange relationship she has with her demon. And I love how that she has those kind of two sides to her character, how she's really poised and manipulative one minute, but then when she's alone, she kind of lets it all out. And you see actually both her vulnerabilities, but also how those have twisted her into being the person she is. So that's one of my favourites. And the other one is the Jackal from Red Rising, who is so evil. But also, like, I mean, you start off not really knowing anything about him other than he is really brutal and really cruel. But then you do get to understand his story throughout the series, and in particular his kind of relationships with his father and sister and how that has maybe shaped him into being the person he is. But he is pretty evil throughout. And even when he's kind of, you know, brought low, he's a genius, right? If he is a genius villain, and even when he's at his lowest of the low, he's still scheming and working out ways, and he goes to such great lengths to get what he wants, which is also a mark of a true villain. And he's very proud, so he ticks a lot of boxes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's like a snake. Like, you think you kill them and then they're not dead, and they just
and then you realize they've got a head again. They've just grown another
Hydra.
Okay. Anybody else have anything to add? That was such a good conversation. I really like that.
No, I just feel bad for the actors, though, who have to play villains. Like, can you imagine walking to an audition and they go, well, you've got the face of an evil person? Like, that's all you can play.
I think it must be really fun to play, though. I think a lot of the times the villains are more fun to play than
I would
100%.
than a hero. Because, you know, in a lot of stories, they're actually more complex than the heroes. You know, their characters.
Well, like Loki, I feel like the actor is a freaking genius, because a lot of times when you play a villain, people in real life put you into that category and you're not liked in real life. So I don't know how he turned it around, but he is a genius. PR team also might be the nicest person on the planet. I'm not sure which it is, but
probably both. It seems like both.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, that's true. Well, okay, we'll wrap it up here then. If you're listening to this, please let us know what your favorite villain is, because I am very curious. You can let us know on our Instagram at Reading Queens Pod, and make sure to follow us there. And also, before you go, please give us a follow on your favorite podcast platform and leave a star rating or a review. And then tell everybody that you know about this podcast, because we're having fun and we want you guys to join us every Wednesday. Yay! That is all I have for you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.